The morning light spilled through the glass walls like liquid gold, flooding Arjun's office in a brilliance that almost felt unreal. He stood by the wide window, looking out at the city that had once been a dream and was now his empire. The streets below buzzed with life, cars honking, people rushing, the hum of ambition carried by the wind. It was everything he had once wanted, everything he had burned for. And yet, as he stared at it all, there was a hollow space inside him that success could not fill. His reflection in the glass looked perfect: tailored suit, polished shoes, the faint confidence of a man who had climbed too high to ever look down again. But behind that reflection, he saw a boy who had once counted coins for instant noodles and studied by candlelight. A boy who had promised his father that one day he'd make it, no matter how long it took. He had kept that promise. But the victory felt strangely distant, as if it belonged to someone else. A soft chime from his phone pulled him back. Messages poured in: "Congratulations on the new deal, you're an inspiration, dinner tonight. Investors want to celebrate." He scrolled without replying. Each word felt weightless. The applause had grown too familiar, too rehearsed to mean anything anymore. He turned from the window, looking at the trophies and certificates that lined his office shelves. Each represented a milestone, one that had cost him nights of sleep, friendships, moments with family. They glittered under the morning sun, silent and indifferent. He ran his hand along the surface of his desk, sleek and spotless, but his mind was far from calm. When his assistant knocked on the door, he quickly straightened up. "Good morning, sir," she said, setting a folder on his desk. "The board meeting starts in 15 minutes. He nodded. "Thank you, Maya." As she left, he opened the folder: reports, graphs, profit margins, and felt the familiar pulse of control return. Numbers had always been his language. They didn't lie, didn't change their minds, didn't leave. But today, even they felt heavier. The company's profits had dipped for the first time in 2 years, and whispers were spreading through the office halls. Whispers of doubt, of fear. He was used to pressure, but something about today made it feel personal, almost fragile. When he entered the boardroom, the air was thick with tension. The directors sat in silence, waiting. The screen on the far wall displayed charts plunging downward. Arjun stood at the head of the table, composed but distant, his voice calm as he explained market trends and strategies. Every sentence was precise, but beneath the practiced tone, a tremor lingered. When the meeting ended, he exhaled slowly, resting his hands on the table. His colleagues filed out with polite nods. The door closed behind them, and the silence returned, deep, suffocating. He looked at the empty chairs. For years, this room had been his battleground, his arena of triumphs. But now, it felt like a cage. Then came the knock. A soft, hesitant one. "Come in," he said without looking up. Maya entered again, holding her phone tightly. Her face was pale. "Sir," she began, voice trembling, there's been an accident." He frowned. "What kind of accident?" She hesitated, eyes dropping to the floor. "It's your father, sir. They've taken him to the hospital." Everything inside him went still. The world, once sharp and loud, blurred at the edges. He didn't remember what he said next, maybe nothing. He just grabbed his coat, his phone, and ran. The elevator felt endless, the lobby too crowded, the drive an eternity. When he reached the hospital, the smell of disinfectant hit him like a wall. Nurses moved briskly through the corridors, voices low and hurried. He approached the reception desk, his voice shaking. "Arjun Mehta, my father was brought in." The nurse looked up with sympathy that made his stomach twist. "Room 312. He ran. His chest ached with every step, and when he burst through the door, time froze. His father lay still beneath the harsh white light, wires tracing fragile lines from his body to the machines beside him. The rhythmic beeping was faint, like the fading tick of a clock running out of seconds. "Dad," he whispered, falling to his knees beside the bed. He took his father's hand, rough, weathered, warm only in memory. He wanted to say so much, to apologize for the birthdays missed, the calls unanswered, the dinners promised and forgotten. But all that came out was a broken whisper. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have been there." The doctor entered quietly. His face said everything before his words did. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mehta. We did all we could." The words dissolved in the air. The monitor flattened into a single, steady tone. The room grew unbearably quiet. Arjun sat there long after the doctor and nurses left, his father's hand still in his. He remembered the sound of his father's laughter, the rough advice spoken over tea. Nothing lasts forever, son, not success, not pain. So be kind, and be present. He had smiled then, thinking it was something old men said to comfort themselves. But now, as the machines fell silent, he understood. Everything he had chased was temporary, every applause, every handshake, every shining number. It could all vanish in a breath. When he finally walked out of the hospital, the evening sky had turned to ash. The city lights blinked indifferently, cars still honking, people still hurrying. The world didn't pause for his grief. It just kept moving. He walked aimlessly through the streets. The wind carried the scent of rain and dust, the sounds of life continuing. He passed by the tiny cafe where he used to study years ago, before everything changed. Through the glass, he saw a young couple laughing over coffee, their hands intertwined. For a moment, he envied them, not for their youth or freedom, but for their presence. For the way they seemed to truly be there. When he finally reached home, the penthouse felt unbearably large. The silence echoed off marble floors and glass walls. He sat by the window, looking out at the endless cityscape he had conquered, and realized how little it meant. The empire he had built stood firm, but inside him, it crumbled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's old watch. It was scratched, the strap worn thin, but it still ticked steadily. He placed it on the table and watched the seconds move. Tick, tick, tick. For the first time in years, Arjun let himself cry. Not the restrained, polite tears of a man used to control, but the deep, shattering kind that stripped away everything. When the sobs faded, a quiet understanding filled the emptiness he'd carried for so long. The pain, the pride, the love, it was all fleeting. Everything was temporary. And yet, that very impermanence made it beautiful. He looked out at the horizon, where the last traces of sunlight lingered before the night claimed them, and whispered into the silence, "I understand now, Dad." Months had passed since the night Arjun lost his father, and though the world around him remained unchanged, the glass towers, the endless traffic, the pulse of ambition, he was not the same man who once stood at the top of it all. The polished arrogance had faded from his stride, replaced by something quieter, steadier. He no longer walked through his office like a conqueror, now he moved like a man learning how to live again. The luxury car still sat in the basement garage, covered in dust. The gold watch lay, forgotten in a drawer. What mattered to him now were the moments that didn't come with applause, the ones that carried meaning, however small. He had started something new, something simple. Every weekend, he visited public schools across the city, places where the paint peeled from walls and the lights flickered, but where hope still lived in young eyes. He told stories there, not of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, but of failure, fear, and lessons learned too late. He didn't stand on a stage or hold a microphone, he sat among the students, at their level, letting his words fall gently like rain. That morning, the sun hung low, soft and forgiving. The school he visited was on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by narrow streets and the scent of dust and flowers. Children gathered in the courtyard, sitting cross-legged with notebooks in their laps. Their faces were curious, some shy, some eager. Arjun stood before them, sleeves rolled up, a faint smile softening his features. "When I was your age," he began, "I thought success meant being untouchable, that I had to win every battle, prove every doubt wrong. And I did, but it came with a price." A boy raised his hand. "What price?" Arjun paused. "Time," he said quietly. "Time with people I loved. Moments that never come back. I kept chasing something I thought would last forever. But nothing does." The courtyard was silent except for the rustle of wind through old trees. Then a small girl with curious eyes asked, "If nothing lasts forever, why do we try at all?" Her question caught him off guard. For a moment, he saw himself in her, the same hunger to understand, the same confusion about the world's unfairness. He knelt down so that he was eye level with her. "Because while everything is temporary," he said, "who we become isn't. You work hard, not to make things last, but to make them matter. What you do for others stays long after everything else fades." She nodded slowly, writing his words down in the corner of her notebook. He smiled, feeling something warm in his chest, not pride, but peace. After the session, he stayed back to talk with the teachers. The walls were cracked, the fans old and whining, but laughter filled the space. The teachers spoke about their students, how they dreamed of becoming doctors, engineers, artists. Arjun listened with genuine interest, making notes on how he could help. He promised to fund new books and repair the leaking roof. They thanked him, but he simply said, "Don't thank me. Thank my father. He taught me what really matters." On his way out, he stopped by a dusty playground. Children were running barefoot, their laughter ringing through the air. One of them called out to him, "Sir, come play." And before he could think, he found himself laughing too, chasing after a worn-out football. For the first time in years, he felt free, stripped of his titles, his reputation, his walls. Just a man, sweating, smiling, alive. As the sun dipped behind the buildings, the sky burned orange and red. He sat on the edge of the field, breathing heavily, watching the kids run. It struck him then, how fragile and beautiful each moment was, how every smile was a tiny miracle that would vanish if you didn't stop to see it. Later that evening, as he walked home, the city lights shimmered through a light drizzle. The air smelled like wet earth, the kind of scent that made you remember you were part of something bigger, something endlessly changing. He didn't rush. Every step felt deliberate, grounded. When he reached his apartment, he didn't head to the office corner or his study. Instead, he went to the small wooden shelf by the window, where his father's photograph stood beside a candle and a few wilted flowers. He sat there, cross-legged, and lit a new candle. The flame danced softly, its reflection glowing in the picture frame. "Dad," he said softly, "I think I understand now. You always said nothing lasts, not joy, not sorrow. I used to think that meant life was cruel. But now I see, it means life is precious." The candlelight flickered, painting warm light across his face. "I used to build things just to prove I could," he continued. "But they never filled the emptiness. Now, every time I help a kid smile or make a teacher's job easier, I feel like, you're here. Like I'm finally doing something that matters." Outside, the rain began to fall harder, tapping softly against the glass. He leaned back, closing his eyes. The sound was comforting, a lullaby reminding him that even storms were temporary, that everything passed. Days became weeks, and Arjun's small initiative grew. Other executives began volunteering, bringing supplies, teaching workshops. He didn't seek credit or publicity, he refused interviews and awards. He only wanted to be part of something that would outlive him. One afternoon, as he was packing books into a car, a woman approached him, the mother of one of the students. She handed him a folded piece of paper. "My daughter wrote this," she said shyly. "She said it's for you." He unfolded it. In uneven handwriting were the words, "Thank you for teaching me that everything ends, but love doesn't." He stood still, his throat tightening. It was such a simple sentence, but it carried everything he had spent years trying to understand. That night, he walked to the old riverside where he used to sit as a student, dreaming of success. The city lights shimmered on the water, and the air was cool. He thought about the empire he once built, the fear of losing it, and how small it all seemed now compared to the quiet joy of helping others. He took out his father's watch, the old one that still ticked faithfully, and held it against his chest. The rhythm of time and heartbeat blended together, fragile, fleeting, real. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of endings. He smiled, whispering into the night, "Everything is temporary, and that's what makes it beautiful." The river carried his words away into the dark, and he felt lighter, freer. The city around him glowed, alive and breathing. The world would keep changing, days would come and go,